Hello, this is Siri and you're listening to my favorite podcast, Not Real Art. I live for this shit cause it's totally lit.
Let's go!
Oh boy. Welcome to Not Real Art, Siri's favorite art and culture podcast with your host Man One and yours truly Sourdough. How you doing, Man One?
What's up? Doing good. Oh my God. Just here, getting ready for the day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was your day look like? You're just hanging with me, I guess, huh?
Yeah, we're hanging right now, but
Worst day ever.
no, it's all good. Happy to be here.
Well, you have been very busy lately. Lots of stuff going on. In fact, you had to cancel a trip
Yeah.
this week because of stuff going on.
Right.
Talk to me. What's new?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just in a doing like always, juggling projects and trying to keep them all up in the air at the same time. But actually, one of the things that's kind of on my mind right now is one of the projects that I didn't get.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and I think I want to talk about this just because I think what I went through in this experience, I think a lot of artists go through and understand, and people deal with it different ways. And I got to see from a firsthand experience again, like how you can get yourself out of it
Yes.
or not.
Right.
And so I was kind of, obviously this kind of stuff happens all the time where, you're amped up, you get someone hires you for a gig, or they offer you a gig, or they're going to buy a painting or whatever. And then it falls through and it's pretty heartbreaking for a number of reasons. Obviously you wanted the money. Obviously it was going to be a good project. Whatever the reasons, at the end of the day, you're bummed. And it's like, how do you rebound from that? So sometimes it's really difficult, And so I just had a situation.
Human nature.
Yeah.
Be disappointed.
And so I just had a situation where, we negotiated for a project for maybe a week or so, maybe even a little over a week. It came down to me and another artist being selected by this agency for this project. They asked me to do a quick sketch just to seal the deal because the client wasn't 100% sure that I was the right artist compared to the other artist. They liked my work and they were leaning towards me, but the last piece that would take it over the top was if I could create these characters that they were thinking about.
So can I ask you a question real quick before you continue? So I think sometimes it matters how these projects come to you. There are, I think, credible and less credible pathways by which artists are approached for work. How were you approached for this project? How did they find you? Was this coming from a quote unquote credible source?
Of course, that's a great point because that's so true. Well, yeah, this was a total credible project. It came through my rep.
Artist rep, illustrator rep?
I have an illustrator rep,
okay.
Richard Salzman,
Okay.
Salzman International.
Shout out to Richard.
Yeah,
hey, Richard.
shout out to Salzman International. He's been repping me for...
Got to get him on the show.
Oh, he'd be great on the show. Yeah, we'll definitely ask him. And so it came through him, this particular agency, flat out said, like, this is what we're pitching to our client. We've pitched Man One. They love it. This is the money involved. This is the whole project. Like, is he interested?
So they were very clear about the terms. They were very forthright. They were very, what we'll say, even aggressive about getting you with this project.
And usually they're not. Usually it's more about, exploration and questions and this and that. This time they were like, and you can tell they were on a deadline because that's usually what happens is they come at you with like, okay, we need this done. So we're already, we're showing our hand, this is what we have to offer. So that's great because then right off the bat where you are with the budget and you can say yes or no to the project right off the bat, but then you can start exploring other things. So, Richard's great. He does a great job for me. in terms of negotiating, in terms of doing the whole back and forth with them. And
that's his job as your rep.
Yeah, and he does everything, on the up and up. And once the terms are figured out and the kind of the contract is being worked out, then he'll go ahead and have them talk directly to me just about the creative. So I'll talk to the client or to the agency or whatever just about the creative, and
once all the business is out of the way,
or at least being handled.
Yeah, right.
It's not always out of the way completely,
sure.
but
okay.
So for example, in this instance, everything wasn't complete yet because there was still some. We kind of upsold them on a couple of different things. For example, instead of producing my work in a digital manner, I could actually paint it. So it didn't have to be
painted on a canvas.
Yeah, or on the building or whatever they were going to do. And so that way, that could save them money on the printing, but also make it more authentic, etc. And they loved that idea. And so then that added money to the budget and things like that. So after, I'd say, a good solid week, if not a couple more days than that, of negotiations with him and the agency, actually the last day of this negotiation, they asked me if I could do some spec work. It was a quick sketch.
Oh shit, spec work.
And so that's always a red flag. I hate doing spec work. Richard.
As a rule, you generally do not do spec work. I understand it.
I generally do not. 9 times out of 10, I won't do it.
And by the way, let's just say this categorically, bottom line very clearly for our listeners, like principally, ethically, we do not endorse spec work. We advise against doing spec work, 9 times out of 10. There's always that one time.
Right. Exactly.
Right? And you think it's worth the risk. Right.
And that's the thing. It's because there is a risk, because I could say, you know what? I don't do spec work, period. And they could say, wow, that's too bad. We're going to have to pass then. And we're talking a significant amount of money on this project, So it's not something that I'm going to take lightly. And so I told them I don't like spec work. Is there any kind of budget you can give me? They're like, well, we haven't landed, there was the agency, so they haven't landed their contract yet either. So it'd have to come out of their pocket, which of course they don't want to do. They said, yeah, can we just do one sketch, pencil sketch, not even color, whatever. So I spoke to Richard about it, and he's against it too. And he's like, well, what do you think? It's up to you. He's like, we've come this far. We're so close, but whatever you want to do. And so I made the decision to go ahead and do a quick sketch. I said, it's not going to take me a lot of time. I'm not going to give them a lot of time and stuff.
Just knock it out.
Just knock it out and just get us to the next round, which is the final round, And so I did the sketch, and they loved it. And they called me the next day and congratulated me and said, you got the project, right?
You got it.
I got the project.
Okay.
So they're like, cool.
So the agency called, I'm sorry, I just want to be clear. The agency in question called Richard back to say, Man One got the job. So based on the spec work, based on all the conversations you had, sounded like this was going on for several days, a week or more, that indeed you got the green light, you got the project, you were verbally awarded the project over the phone.
Correct. There was already paperwork being worked out. This happened on a Friday, and we're supposed to, I had a tight timeline, and
what else is new?
Yeah, right? Yeah. So I was supposed to start, we were supposed to hit the road running on Monday. So over the weekend, there was a bunch of paperwork, transferred back and forth, and everything on our end was done. We were waiting for their final signature and obviously their deposit, which was going to happen early the following week, because they know I'm not going to start until I get the money, until I get the deposit. So everything was great, and I was like, they were happy, we were happy. It was going to be a good, fun project. And so, here's the thing that happens. Here's the part where artists go crazy, right? And drives me nuts. So what are you supposed to do when someone tells you, you got the project, here's X amount of dollars, and by the way, for the next 2.5 weeks, you have to block out this whole chunk of time, right? Because we need to make this timeline work. And so that was my job the whole weekend, was making sure I can, free up all that time, moving things around in my schedule.
You had to clear the decks and make way for this project to get it done, to meet the deadline, which you were doing because they told you that you had gotten the job.
Exactly. So Monday morning, jazz to get started. I wake up in the morning. First thing I do, I check my email, and there's this email that says, "I'm so sorry," from the agency. "I'm so sorry. I hate to do this to you guys, but the client decided to go another route. Maybe next time we can work on something else." And it's like a bomb being dropped. Imagine, that's the first thing I read waking up on Monday morning after having 3 days to think about what I'm going to do, for this project, thinking about, I still have bills and, rent and all kinds of other stuff to worry about. And now I'm obviously in my head figuring out how that's going to work. And, all those things you think about as an artist when you get a project like this. And then all of a sudden you get this bomb dropped on you saying, by the way, you don't have the project after all. And thank you very much, and
fuck you very much.
Yeah. And it's happened before. It's not the first time this has happened, but it usually doesn't happen after they've already told you yes, and now it was verbal. There was no contract signed by them. So I couldn't go after them for like a kill fee, or I couldn't go after them for anything else. We were just left like, what the fuck, even my rep called me back. He literally called me and said, "I just want to commiserate with you." Cause
yeah, he was hurt by this too. He was offended and
he was also blindsided by it.
Yeah. Right.
Because he's like, we were, as for all intents and purposes, we were already on the road.
Well, from his perspective, it's
a done deal.
Well, but this was damaging to his reputation too, because he called you, right. They called him, he called you. Right. He had been negotiating in good faith, so he thought. You had been negotiating in good faith, so you thought. Turns out the agency wasn't negotiating in good faith.
And to prove that, exactly what you just said, he's like, I don't know what we can do. And there's pretty much nothing we can do. And I said, well, I did do a sketch for them, not that they're going to pay me that much for a sketch, right. But there's something maybe, right. And so he's like, well, let me see what I can do. So he contacted them and told them, he did do a sketch in good faith and blah, 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 it'd be nice to at least, and their reply was, no, we're not going to pay him for his sketch, because there was no contract signed at the time, and he did it as spec work, and at the end of the day, he didn't get the job. So no, we don't owe him anything. And that even pissed him off even more, because now he's like, at least throw a fucking bone,
right. Right.
Because you've already a courtesy,
yeah.
Just throw me $500 to say, fuck you very much.
Right.
But it's one of those things where, once again, this is why I don't want to do spec work. This is why I hate doing spec work. But I knew at the time when they asked me, I knew that if I would have said no to that spec work, they would have just at that moment said, never mind, we're going to go with the other artist. So it was a gamble I took. And at the end of the day, I still got screwed over, so it still didn't work out. So we had a long talk after that. And my rep said, from now on, it's 100% of the time, no spec work. Like, we don't care from now on. Because at the end of the day, like I said, 9 times out of 10, I don't do spec work. But that one time, maybe, well, guess what? It doesn't work out even when you think it works out. So I think it's a better deal just to have this 100% no spec work ever on any conditions, because then you just don't have to worry about this. It's a mind fuck afterwards, So that was the business side of it, and the part of, being an artist and checking all the boxes, jumping through all the hoops, and being told you got it, and then it being snatched, from you, so that's all the heartbreak and all that. But the more interesting part for me was what it did to me, kind of like just, I guess, emotionally, spiritually after that, which before when this happened, stuff like this happened, I never really sat and thought about that stuff. I just like went through whatever I went through, moved on, whatever. But this time I was actually very, very conscious about what was happening to me. And I noticed that obviously the first thing that happened was depression. It was like I got super depressed, and I'm not one that usually gets depressed, but because of things that were going on in my life, because of like this was coming at the right time for me.
The money was perfectly timed.
Everything was going to work about it. Right. It was a project I wanted to do. There was all these positive things about it. So usually it's like, fuck them. I don't care about that project anyways. Well, this one, because of all these things that were aligned, I was kind of counting on it. And so I got very depressed. I noticed that right away. It was crazy because since I was so conscious of it, I was like, okay, obviously I don't want to stay in this depressed mood, but I have to, I have to go through the process. Right? You have to go through the process of whatever, whether it's depression or mourning,
stages of grief,
all, you got to go through it.
Yeah.
But I literally told myself, how quickly can I get myself out of this?
Sure.
And what can I do? And that was the thing that I don't always really internalize and really think about as it's happening. Usually I look back and I'm like, oh, wow, that's what was happening. But this time I was very present. And so I was like, I don't want to stay depressed. I don't want to stay in this mood. How can I kickstart all this stuff? And so I did. I decided to do a bunch of things, and it was very interesting because, I don't have, I'm not into drugs or alcohol or anything like that.
A lot of people would have gone to a medical marijuana dispensary.
Yeah. Right. A lot of people would have gone to a lot of different things. Yeah. I'm glad I'm not, because I saw that moment. Like, if you have some kind of addiction, if you need that in your life, and I know a lot of artists do that, this would have definitely been one of those moments.
Yeah, triggering event.
A triggering event. I was like, well, that's not what I'm about. So, thank God I'm not into that kind of stuff. But what can I do positively, So I decided to just turn myself around and figure out a way to get myself out of it, I kind of did, it took work, and it took me putting stuff out there, to just, it's almost like I put myself out there to kind of ask for help in a way, or to just explore what's available, my options. Eventually some positive things ended up happening later in the week. If you would have asked me Monday morning, where am I at between, 1 and 10, I would have been like, I'm a 1. And I didn't see a way out on Monday morning. I was like, I'm screwed. I don't even know how I'm going to get out of this. And if you ask me on Friday of that week, I was feeling great, and a lot of things happened that worked out on other fronts. Things that I wasn't even expecting happened. And I think it all happened because I had faith in the process. I put myself out there and I didn't give up,
Well, it strikes me that what you had was emotional intelligence, because you had the self-awareness and the self-respect and the self-love enough to allow yourself to actually kind of sit in the anger, sit in the sadness and the disappointment and everything. And you didn't beat yourself up, and you didn't try to self-medicate, and you didn't try to, just deny or leapfrog over your feelings. Like, you let yourself kind of recognize, like, I feel like shit right now, and this is why, but I'm going to try to get through this. And you loved yourself through it, and you opened yourself up, to goodness and to positivity and to new opportunity, and a lot of people would want to get through that. Like, they'd want to go to the bar and get drunk, or go to the dispensary and get a J and just try to deal with it in the moment, instant gratification kind of stuff. And, you sat in it, and you were patient with yourself, and it took a few days, but you turned it around. And that's, I think that says a lot about, it says a lot about you, because, I've known you a long time, and you've always been a very positive, mature, intelligent person, but it's hard. I don't care who you are, right? I mean, having those very human, it's totally human to be hurt and angry and totally fair to be, mad and all that stuff. But to be able to, learn from it, grow from it, learn from it, and be better, be bigger and stronger from it. Is really, I think, the lesson here, right, for other artists. Because, I don't care if you're an artist or not. I mean, if you're in business, you're going to get blindsided by stuff. Things are going to happen. You're not always going to get the contract. Sometimes you won't be able to make payroll. Sometimes you will have to fire somebody or let someone go or what have you. And if you're a caring, empathetic, emotionally intelligent person, those things are going to be fucking hard to do. And that's just on the human level, right? I mean, there's so much about what happened to you with that project that we could unpack and talk about. Right. That, because I've had similar situations. I mean, I had a similar situation, it was a contract we were negotiating for 6 months, and it was with Universal Studios. Right? It was a huge project. And after 6 months of good faith negotiation, so I thought, the contract didn't happen, and I had a very, I was like you, I was depressed. I was, a lot of stuff.
I remember,
and one of the lessons that I learned in that, for me, myself, and I anyway, is that is there a way? Because they're not going to sign an NDA, they're not going to sign a contract right out of the gate, right? And yet, as a creative consultant, as a creative professional, as an artist, what have you, you have to close the deal. And to close the deal, you have to give a lot of your own thinking, your own ideas, your own IP away to entice the client into signing the contract or to win the project or whatever. So you're giving away goodness that you're not getting compensated for. So is there an opportunity to sign some kind of letter of intent right up front, one page, super simple, that says, we're going to negotiate in good faith. If you don't sign the contract, all the IP remains with me. And if you cancel, maybe there's a fee or there isn't, or if you do sign the contract, then obviously it's all rolled in or whatever. But I think for me, it's about knowing they can't take my ideas and run with them without me. So that it's that simple letter of saying, we're going to negotiate in good faith. The IP is mine. If you don't agree, blah, blah, blah. Now, is a big company like Universal Studios with all their lawyers going to sign something like that? I don't know. There needs to be, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't try. Exactly. And it doesn't mean that you shouldn't figure out ways of protecting yourself as a business person, as an artist, so on and so forth, as a human being. The other takeaway, and you and I have talked a lot about this over the years, but I'm done working with brands. Done. I've been screwed so many times. Now, let me give you a little bit of context. I know you might know this, but for those listeners who may not. So, I got my start as a graphic designer in 1988 in Chicago, working in advertising and marketing and for consumer brands. So, they sort of refer to it as the marketing services industry. Well, working with brands over the last 30 years has changed hugely. Okay. I actually remember back in the day, there was no spec work. There was no such thing as spec work. Really. Spec work, as I recall, spec work started happening. What started happening was, and I think the computer, because see what happened was, the desktop publishing and the Mac and the Apple democratized creative services in a way that allowed independent designers, or a lot of designers, to go independent. So they worked at Leo Burnett for 20 years, and then suddenly they could get a computer at home and they could work from home and start a little cottage, industry, and what ended up happening was small agencies started popping up. And so to compete with the big agencies, they started offering spec work. Well, we'll give you show you a little leg, give you a little concept here and there. Right. Well, clients started clamoring onto that, and it kind of expecting it, and then and then I think, because to win the project, you do have to show some thinking and show some concepts and stuff. But bigger agencies have, maybe less to lose, or they can afford the risk, or maybe who knows what kind of relationships they have with those clients. They have big lawyers too that help protect them and what have you. But anyway, the point is that as smaller independent shops, started opening up, I think the growth of spec work, really spiked. And so now clients expect it and ask for it. And it does put artists and creatives in a difficult situation. I think, the reality is nothing's going to change until artists and creatives as a whole say no to spec work, like no spec work, and because it's got, you got to like shut it off right on the supply side at the source, I mean,
you think that's feasible in this day and age where everyone has an iPad, everyone has a computer.
Right. Well, it's even worse than that. It's worse than that because the reality is just like technology devalued music. You think about what Napster did, right? I mean, there's this whole generation of kids that didn't think they should pay for music, right?
Right.
Why should I pay for music? Well, that's why now musicians can only make money on the road. They don't make any money off streaming. They don't make any money off sales of records.
SoundCloud.
Yeah, right. Shout out SoundCloud. And so, technology disrupted, in an industry, but was it for the better? I don't think so. Not for artists. And so, but this has happened then on the creative services side. Okay. Look, true story. Okay. I worked for a while at a global publicly traded agency called Anthem Worldwide. It's owned by Shock. They're based out of San Francisco, but they have offices all over the world. Actually, maybe now they're based out of Toronto. But the point is that I was talking to a colleague there a while back, old friend. And keep in mind, this is a global publicly traded company with offices, I think 30 offices around the world. They work with the biggest companies in the world, Pepsi, Coke, you name it. I was talking to this person and they were saying that it is taking them 1 year to get paid on their invoices.
Damn.
Okay. Now, there's all kinds of reasons for that we won't get into. But my point is that working for brands, no matter your size, is problematic. It's problematic these days. And there's a lot of reasons why working with clients and brands is a dysfunctional, abusive, stressful dynamic. I'm saying all this to say that I've gotten to a point where if an artist were to ask me, what I think about working with brands or what have you, this is what I would say. I would say, fuck that. Don't bother. The only way I think an artist now should work with a brand is if that artist is working directly with the VP of marketing or the CMO of marketing or the CEO of the company, working with the person who writes the check, working with the person with the power. Because in your situation, what happened was, I'll tell you what happened because I know exactly how it works, right?
Yeah.
Because and a lot of this, of course, is in terms of your situation, you can kind of see it from hindsight, but like typically the way these things go, right, is that what you don't know as the artist is that agency hasn't even secured that account yet.
Oh, yeah.
They're just pitching. They're hoping to win it.
Right.
And what they're doing is they're probably showing 3 different concepts to the client.
3 different artists.
With 3 different artists or 3 different, totally different routes or different things, but they don't know what the client's going to choose. But as far as they're concerned, they have to amp you up because they want to make sure you're on board. So they're pumping you up thinking like it's going to happen or you're the guy or whatever. And at the same, but the truth of the matter is they haven't even locked it in yet. And listen, I've been both on the agency side and I've been on the brand side. I have worked, in a corporate brand environment. And I will tell you that, when you work in a corporate environment, you can't imagine, until you work in that environment, you can't imagine how dysfunctional and crazy it is.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
There are so many reasons why a project does or doesn't get done, or agency does or doesn't get hired, or an artist doesn't, that you can't even imagine. It's not rational. half the time. It's, oftentimes political, sometimes dysfunctional and unfair and all this stuff. So I'm saying that to say that being an agency these days, I mean, I basically worked in the agency world for 20 years, right. and I'm done. I'm done with it because it is hard work for little money. It's dysfunctional. There's no loyalty on the brand side. It's dog eat dog because, to your point, it's a commodity now. When you have, I forget the website, I want to say logoworks.com, but you can go to logoworks.com, whatever the website is, and get a logo designed for, a couple $100 or something, right? They have different packages and you can, different things, and apparently, according to their website, some of the biggest companies in the world use them. Coca-Cola, Pfizer, whoever else. And when you're competing, when you're an artist or an agency trying to work in an environment where the services you provide are commoditized and thought of as a commodity, and they're just trying to get the most for the lowest amount of money. Right. That's a losing situation. And I know that there's a lot of mythology around why an artist wants to work with a brand. Oh, it could lead to bigger things. And if I work for Coke, I'll work for Red Bull, or I'll do this. And, there's all kinds of ways we rationalize, and at the end of the day, artists, they want their art to be seen, and they want it to, sometimes not even about the money. They just want, but the reality is, though, those it's called myth for a reason. 9 times out of 10, those jobs don't lead to bigger opportunities. A lot of times, there is no loyalty. That client doesn't call you back for all kinds of reasons. And so it ends up just being a falsehood, and I'm just at a point now where I personally want to get as far away from working with brands as possible. I would advise artists to, unless they're working directly with the brand at a high level and are comfortable with how they're being treated. Because if you're being disrespected, or if you're not comfortable, if your intuition is telling you that something is not healthy about this or fair or whatever, then you shouldn't do it.
But realistically, I mean, come on. You think a brand is going to reach out to an artist directly ever?
Yeah, it can happen. It's rare. It's rare.
Super rare.
It's super rare. But see, look, and part of the reason I say that is because so there was a time I helped open a studio it was a London-based consultancy that was opening a Chicago studio, and I helped open that studio, and then I opened the LA studio. And I was very successful in terms of growing those businesses in Chicago and in LA. But the secret to my formula, really, in terms of success, was that I always called the CMO or the VP. Like, I went to the highest level, right? And to have that direct relation, because basically you want to be as close to the checkbook as possible.
Of course, yeah.
And so, so anyway, so I have my reasons for thinking that. But the point is that, to your point, yes. I mean, artists are going to get called by agencies all the time. They're going to get called, because that's typically, brand is going to call the agency is going to call the brand. I mean, the artist. And so, so you're right. I mean, that's going to happen a lot. And artists just need to have a process by which they feel protected and feel like they can engage in a way that's comfortable for them, that feels right. Because, unfortunately, I think majority of the time, they're not going to get the project, or if they do get the project, the money is going to be lean and mean.
Well, I'm not at the point yet where I'm ready to sign off on agency work or brand work. It's kind of a love-hate relationship that I have with them.
Right.
In my ideal world, the only brand I'm working with is Man One.
That's right. Yeah.
Right? That's what I want to do.
Yeah.
I want to just work on Man One brand. That's the brand I want to work on. But the reality is, if I get a call, and I don't usually go searching really for these projects. They generally just kind of happen out of the blue or whatever. It's not like I'm actively, calling Coke to try to get a gig with them or anything like that. So when they do come my way, generally I have my rep kind of vet it, do all that so that I'm as far away from it as possible until they need me, until we actually decide they want to do it. But even then, as I just stated, even then it could go wrong. But for me, also being an artist and being someone who's doing murals and someone who's doing canvas work and commission work, it's agency work, brand work is actually a good chunk of my income per year.
Sure. Yeah.
Sometimes more than other years.
Right.
Sometimes less than other
Right.
years. It could be 10% of my annual. It could be 50%. Like, I never know on a given year. So
But it's significant.
But it's significant enough that I want to do it. And by the way, sometimes I'll get, projects that don't sound good or the money's not right or whatever, and I'll just say no right off the bat. So there is a dilemma there for me as an artist, because it's like, I can't just say I don't want to do brand work.
Right.
It's not that
cut and dry
for me. But there's this thing, how do I manage it? How do I keep working with it?
Well, I think, let me, look, it is a personal decision. It's a business decision. I think what I'm advocating for more than anything is that that artists are able to work with brands is, in a way that protects them. You've got your rep. But I think what's interesting about this story is that, even your rep got blindsided on this one, what I mean? And
that's not usually the case.
So, and this process is meant to protect you, right? Your rep protects you, and he, handles the business, and so this, I think this is an anomaly, this doesn't happen all the time, but it does happen a lot. And quite frankly, though, I think part of what this is that, I think artists are being called on more and more by brands. So it feels like artists are feeling this for the first time. Like, it feels like it's happening all the time because it's happening for the first time, if you know what I mean. Look, back in the day, in the 90s, late 80s and 90s, there was a fine line. I mean, not a fine line. There was a real line between commercial art and fine art.
Yeah.
Right. And if you were an ad agency or a brand, you were working with photographers or illustrators or copywriters or, other kinds of creatives that were getting hired. They didn't care about having their name on the work. It was for the brand. It was for the ad. It was for the campaign. It was for whatever. And fine artists or artists, quote unquote, were busy doing their art and trying to sell in galleries and, get, that kind of thing happening. And then over the last 25 years or more, as brands have tried to embrace authenticity or cultural relevance or, what have you, and I think, tools have democratized creativity in many ways. And, there's, I think there's probably a lot more artists out there maybe now than there were 30 years ago.
And also the failing gallery system.
Well, and the failing gallery system. That's right. So now artists are having to fend for themselves in many ways that they, didn't necessarily have to maybe before, whatever. But so I think what you have here is you have, a trend, you have this new reality, right? Where before it didn't happen, brands didn't work with artists in an overt way like they do now for street cred and for that halo effect that comes from working with a, world-class artists like you, the cool factor. Brands want the cool factor. And artists are the new rock stars now and the new cool kids now. And so brands want that halo effect, but the reality is, just like the gallery system was kind of dysfunctional, the brand agency model is dysfunctional. It is an abusive, dysfunctional relationship between brand and agency. I can speak to that personally, having been in that world for a long time. And so it only makes sense that the relationship between the agency and the artist is going to be dysfunctional.
Right. And that's
garbage in, garbage out.
And that's why I think the goal for every artist right now in this time period, right, or most artists, I should say, is create your own following, sell directly to your own people, right? And control all your IP.
Could always control your own IP.
And so what happens, though, if you do that successfully, is galleries are going to try to get you on their team. Brands are going to come and want to work with you, and so that's where, so it's a crazy time we're living in right now, because there's two ways of doing it, right? Like, there's artists who are trying to get into the brands to grow that way, or trying to get into certain galleries to grow that way. But then there's artists who are trying to neglect all that stuff and do their own thing, their own path.
Right.
But then that attracts the galleries and that attracts the brands. Some artists don't want to go that route. Some artists do. And so it's just there's no right way, one way of doing it.
It's complicated. It's complicated. And it's very nuanced, and every situation is a little bit different. And by the way, artists, for the most part, hope springs eternal with artists. Yes, I know a lot of artists who are just cynical, pissed off, angry, depressed people, but there is some core of optimism and hope in every artist I've ever met. And so, yeah, when somebody's waving a carrot in front of your face, or if someone gives you a frog and tells you to kiss it, it might be the prince or princess you've been waiting for, God damn it, you kissed the frog, and so it is complicated, but the other thing that's interesting about this conversation, right? Have you ever heard the phrase sunlight is the best disinfectant?
Mm-hmm.
Right. Right.
Yeah,
so
yeah, right.
So exposure, transparency, right. It sort of cleanses. Right. So if that's true at all, what I find interesting about this conversation is that, and about many conversations like this, is that artists and people talking about it are loath to call out the agency or the brand specifically.
Right.
So I know the agency that we're talking about.
Yeah.
And by the way, we should maybe say the name of that agency, right? But we're not, right? And why aren't we, right? Because they fucked us. Like, why are we being loyal to them when they weren't loyal to you? Why are we showing them the respect they didn't show you? So I think part of this, part of the debate, part of the conversation is, should artists start calling out these agencies? Because what happens is, like, sometimes the brands get called out. You might mention, I mentioned Universal Studios, very specifically. Well, it's not going to matter. I mean, at the end of the day, the agencies that do these artists, I again, not necessarily an easy thing to do, but I think easy answer here. But there's part of me that absolutely wants to call bullshit and name names, because how else is it going to get resolved if you don't shame people?
Right. And the reason I don't want to call out the agency specifically is because at the end of the day, I don't really know what happened.
Sure.
Fair point. Like it may have totally been they screwed it up for me, or it may have been that the client totally screwed. According to them, obviously they're blaming the client and the client decision. And that may be 100% true. So I don't want to call them out on that for that reason, but I also think it's more important, the bigger picture, that it's more of a systemic thing.
Yes.
And so whether I call out this agency or not, it's kind of irrelevant, because it's going to happen with any other agency.
Well, so absolutely, it is a systemic thing. And this is, I want to reiterate what I was saying a minute ago, because when I was talking about not wanting to work with brands anymore, not wanting to work with agencies anymore, and me advising artists not to do that, really, that was coming from such a personal place, because I personally don't want to work in the marketing services space with brands from an agency perspective anymore, because I personally know how disrupted and how it was always maybe a bit adversarial. I mean, you're the client, and you're trying to make the client happy, and they expect you to do what they want, and because they're paying you, whatever. That's always kind of been the case when you're in the client services world. But it has become so dysfunctional, and there's no loyalty, and there's no, and it's so commoditized. And I've been down this path. I know how the story ends, or where we're at right now. And I can tell you it's been better, and it's bad right now. And it's not getting better. It's getting worse. And so me personally, I'm just saying, like it is a mess. It is a systemic problem, and so the corporate client agency relationship is dysfunctional. It only makes sense that the agency artist relationship is going to be dysfunctional. Let me give you an example of how crazy sometimes things are. When I was at one particular, I was head of brand strategy, one of the directors of brand strategy at Kaiser Permanente for a few years, and we launched the Thrive campaign, which won a ton of awards in the healthcare space, because it was really innovative for healthcare marketing. And so being part of the brand strategy team, I got to hire agencies. And what was interesting for me was that I had been on the agency side for years, for 15 years, and then I jumped to the client side. So suddenly I was doing the hiring. I wasn't trying to get hired. I was hiring. And I had a lot of empathy for agencies. I was probably a damn good client to have because I knew I'd been on that side of the fence. And so, you think about the core drivers of the dysfunction, core drivers of the systemic problems that we're talking about, right? There's all kinds of drivers, right? For example, one of the drivers, back when I started in the late 80s and the 90s, marketing budgets sat in the marketing department. So the marketing VP or the CMO, whatever, they could manage their checkbook. And, in what was the Enron thing, right? Enron gave us Sarbanes-Oxley, right? Which was government getting in, creating policies to try to prevent from another Enron from happening. Okay. Well, as a practical matter, what that meant on the corporate side is that corporations started creating these procurement and supply departments that were responsible for managing the purchasing and in the budgets of that organization. So as a way of helping to stop corruption or stop fraud or whatever the case is. And so what happened was the marketing budgets got moved away from marketing to procurement and supply. So, and procurement and supply doesn't give a shit if you're talking about paying and hiring a high-end agency or if you're buying paper clips. They are handling it in the same way. It's a widget. They don't care. And so it is such a complicated thing. So at Kaiser Permanente, we had this procurement and supply thing. And so the way it worked there, for example, was that if I was hiring an agency and the project was $100,000 or less, okay, I could sign that invoice. You can make that decision. I could make that decision. As soon as it was 100,001, I had to kick it over to procurement and supply. And what that meant was it was going to be a 6-month process. I'm just saying this because this is just one example of how things happen in the world that causes chain reaction of bullshit, that causes new policies and new realities, in a business environment that helps to feed dysfunctional kinds of systemic problems that inevitably impact people's lives. And in this particular case, we're talking about a dysfunctional relationship that clients have with agencies and agencies have with brands. And there are so many reasons why that happens that, to our point earlier, that's why there's in many times no simple answer.
It's super complicated. And then now you have artists who have to navigate that space a lot of times on their own.
Right. Exactly.
With no help. Luckily, I have a rep, but I'm not going to say every artist has a rep. Right. Probably most don't. Right.
A friend of mine worked in the music licensing space, and he was doing a deal with Google. Long story short, the deal he was doing with Google was with YouTube, and all he really wanted was the right to put Google's name and YouTube brand on this project. Okay. Now, Google had approached them about this music licensing technology that they had. There was no money being exchanged. It was going to be a game-changing project for this small company, my friend's small company. Google loved what they were doing, and it ended up being huge for them because he ended up selling the company and making a lot of money, and it was great. But this deal was pivotal for him in terms of setting the company up for a sale, right? Mm-hmm. And so remember, there was no money being exchanged here. Right. They wanted him, and he just wanted the right to use their name. Guess how many lawyers had to sign off on that contract? Well, don't guess. I'll tell you. 15 lawyers. Yeah. 15 lawyers had to sign off on the deal. It took damn near a year for that to happen. Right. Now, this is again just an example of like how artists can beat themselves up, they can blame other people, they can get angry, and yet it is so beyond them and so beyond anything that's personal or so beyond anything that they can affect.
Right.
That don't waste your energy and time beating yourself up or being, if you can, yes, you could be disappointed, it's very human, but like in your situation, to bring it back around, like to have the self-respect, self-love, and emotional intelligence just to sit in it and go like, yeah, this is life.
And what I want to, the point about that is, yes, I sat with it and, went through all the emotions, whatever. But what pulled me out of it, or I should say the way I pulled myself out of it really, was I thought about it this way. I said, what can I do? All these things you just mentioned are out of our hands.
Right.
These decisions by the agency, by the brand, they're out of my hands. I can't do anything about it. I said, what can I do? And as an artist, the only thing that I know how to do is to create. And so I decided to create something.
Mm-hmm.
And creating isn't just a physical item, isn't just a painting. Creating is also creating the space for people to come into your life. It's also creating an attitude. There's a lot of different ways to create. And so that's what I focused on. I focused on what can I do to create something today, tomorrow, the next day, that's going to bring some positivity into my life and all that. And that's what pulled me out. I decided that I was going to be a creator, and not worry about the things that I don't have control, over. But the only thing I have control over is being able to create. That's what got me out of it. And I think if there's artists out there who get depressed, who get down, who decide to be numb to the situation, those things end up causing you not to be creative. And I think as an artist, if you cut yourself off to being creative, then you're basically that's it. You're done. You're committing suicide. So I think as an artist, you can always think, all right, I'm in a situation now. How do I create myself out of it? And that's kind of what that's kind of been that's what I got out of this experience, was that truly I can create myself and create my way out of it. And that's
I think that's a huge point you're making, because artists have that unique ability to create. We all do, right? We all can create on some level, but that's what artists do. And I think what you were saying is really powerful about creating the space, creating the mindset, creating the attitude. Because at the end of the day, like, all we can really control is our attitude, right? And you decided to create an attitude for yourself that allowed you to get to a point where you could turn negative into positive, turn non-productivity to productivity, and then eventually allowing yourself to get through this process and end up in a really positive place for yourself.
Yeah, and I mean, if I look back on it, it still pisses me off.
Of course.
I still want to call them back and tell them off. But the bigger point is that I learned from it, and I'm able to apply that to the future, to future projects, to future dealings, and more importantly, be satisfied that, hey, you know what? I was able to get myself out of this shit and out of this way of feeling, and continue with my career and move forward. So it's been a big week in terms of me being able to actually, see this in real time, and it's kind of cool.
Right. Oh, that's great. Well, my co-host with the most, Man One, unfortunately, we've exceeded the legal limit of our broadcasting license. So we got to wrap this up before the feds revoke our privileges. I want to remind our countless listeners around the world, I know that we have millions and millions of listeners, to please be sure to give us their social media love by subscribing, posting comments, liking and sharing this episode with their friends. And of course, we have our 24-hour hotline they can always call to tell us what's on their mind. That's 888-NOT-REAL or 833-NOT-REAL or 833-668-7325. Give us a call. Tell us what's on your mind. All that said, we're out. Have a beautiful day, Mr. Man One.
All right, sourdough. We're out.
Peace.
Peace.